everybody. Welcome to Ideas by Interpreters, episode 23. Can't believe we've gotten that far. It's kind of amazing. Here we have today with us a seasoned Spanish interpreter, Alfie Mendez. He is on in our Buslingo Professional Interpreter Network and takes calls with us on a daily basis. And I wanted to invite him here to do an interview with an interpreter and get an idea of how he started his journey in freelance interpreting. So, Alfie, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to introduce you here to everybody in the audience, and we'll get started with the interview.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Hello, everybody.
So, Alfie, thank you for being here again. Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Morelia, Michoacan in Mexico.
Okay, cool. And how big is your town? Is it like roughly how big is the size?
Well, it's a city, um, an old historical city. It's not one of the biggest cities in the country for sure, but it's not one of the smallest either. I'd say it's an
Okay.
average size for the size of cities we have here.
Okay, great. Yeah, just to give them sort of an idea. And normally we have sort of a presentation deck here on these webinars, but this is just a podcast style. We're not going to be showing any slides or anything. So as you're listening, you can be, doing other things at the same time too. You don't have to be following a presentation, PowerPoint, or anything like that. I did want to mention also that this webinar, it's meant to be very interactive and open and casual. So I'm going to be going through some questions with Alfie here just to sort of give a lay of the land and his interpreting experiences. But please do feel free, all audience members, to put some questions in, comments. Let us know if you want us to talk about anything in particular, if you need anything, any information on anything or tips, tricks, that kind of thing. Just let us know. So let's get started here with the questions. So first of all, the main question is, how did you get into the interpreting industry, Alfie?
Well, in my case, it was unexpected. I didn't think I would be doing this back when I was an English teacher, and well, at some point in my life, greatly because I became a father, I had to reorganize my life, my time, of course, and I had to find different way to make a living other than an 8-hour or full-time job where I couldn't really divide my time in a way that I could do everything I had to do at that moment, especially with being a new dad and all. So I went online, searched for what I could, if there was something I could do from home, something that would allow me to better manage my time and not necessarily be tied down for so long forcefully every day, right? So I stumbled upon this, and I was definitely blown away by the possibilities that this offered me.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's one of our biggest sort of attractive features with this platform is that you can work freelance. You can do this job whenever you have the time or whenever you want or are able. And being a dad, like you said, it's a perfect opportunity as a new dad. You maybe you need to stay home with your kids or have more flexibility in your schedule. And so exactly right. And before you were doing this, you were teaching English. What kind of classes did you have? Were you teaching kids or?
Well, actually, being an early bilingual, a lot of people around the family, friends, relatives would ask me at first if I could teach them, but more
Right.
professionally. I taught from elementary all the way to university, and but I definitely enjoyed the most working with children, fifth graders, fourth graders. They're just a blast.
Yeah, it's a fun age group, and they absorb language very, very easily and quickly. I used to teach
Right.
English as well, so I'm familiar.
Mhm.
And I think my quickest learning students were always like the 3 or 4 year olds because they just would absorb everything
Mm,
so fast, like sponges.
yes.
Um, yeah, and it's kind of has a similar story. I mean, a little bit reversed. I ended up teaching English when I was living in Spain, and then got into interpreting. So
Mhm.
yeah, similar story there. Um,
Mhm.
so let's go sort of deeper into the types of interpreting you've done, um, and what sort of ones you felt more comfortable in, which ones you've liked, which ones you haven't liked. What
Right.
sort of interpreting, yeah, have you done?
Well, I've done, I'd say pretty much, well, I can't say all industries because there are so many, but I would say several. I've been working, well, I've worked for immigration services, 911, technical support, customer service, that sort of thing, sales. And of course, as you progress and you are required to advance your training, your skills, I went into ever more complex scenarios such as banking, insurance, legal, and finally medical was the final training I got. And so I started getting a lot of medical calls. I guess, well, I don't guess, I'm sure I know that it's the most
Hmm.
demanded field at the time being. A lot of people, everybody requires medical services. So, and not everybody
Right.
speaks the language, right? So, yes, that's definitely something that is going to be uh, required worldwide for a long time, for sure. I don't think it's going anywhere ever.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Just to sort of echo that sentiment, medical interpreting for us at Buslingo, the types of services we're providing, it's definitely around maybe 75% of the calls we're doing at this point. So
Hmm.
it's really something that you can become successful in as an interpreter, um, especially doing freelance because the industry trends more towards remote interpreting. So if you
Right,
are able to be credentialed in medical interpreting and keep up with your credentials, then that will give you an edge that other interpreters may not have. Just a tip out there for some interpreters. And if you have any questions on programs uh, that would be considered valid or programs to look at or courses to take, just send us a message. My email is caroline@boostlingo.com. I think you guys already know that, but you can always email me if you need any recommendations.
right.
Um, so you did say that you felt, um, well, actually, you didn't mention yet, but which sort of fields have you felt most comfortable in interpreting? Like, what sort of where do you feel like you're in your element?
Um, I'd say social services, immigration, 911, and medical. Those would be the ones I feel most comfortable in.
Yeah, and those are is it mainly because those are the ones you've done the most, or you feel sort of a kinship with those types of services?
I think it's more the latter because I guess, I mean, I don't think I have a preference for banking, insurance, and all that kind of thing. What I can see from feeling most comfortable in social services, immigration, 911, and medical is that they're all human centered. I guess
Right, right.
helping people mostly in these sort of scenarios is more of a personal and a human touch more than just money or that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, I totally understand. I come from a social work background, so I'm
Mm,
sort of a mixture there of social interest in humanities, social services, and of
right.
course languages. So yeah, I totally
Yes.
understand. It's very rewarding to be able to get off of a interpreting session and feel like you've really helped the client or the LEP
Hmm.
get what they need access to in terms of medical or social.
Right.
So many different types of services out there, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, so I understand. Um, in the freelance interpreting field, how have you been able to kind of market and network with clients? I know it's not the most straightforward thing because it's not sort of paving the way in a lot of ways with remote interpreting.
Hmm.
But as an interpreter, how do you feel like you're able to network yourself or find jobs?
Well, in my case, like you said, we have. Well, I had to take advantage of new technologies in order to be able to network remotely because where I'm living, there's not much of a face-to-face um, contact with other people in this field. So I being online, searching, I'm a believer that if you want to find something and you look for it and you're diligent in doing so, eventually you'll come up with something, you'll find something, and that's pretty much how I've done it. It's all been online, it's all been remotely, and in my case, I've Pros.com has really helped in this matter, and there are also other services, other websites like LinkedIn, which is also great for networking. But Pros.com is oriented towards translators, linguists, and interpreters. So it's more of a it's more specific. LinkedIn, everything.
Yeah, right. So, I do the same. You know, those are all great tips for any new interpreter starting out. LinkedIn, keep it up to date, and try to find a way to keep your profile interesting. You know, because if you just put Spanish interpreter, maybe you need to have some sort of niche or some way to make yourself set apart so that it looks like um, you can provide something cutting edge or different. And
Hmm.
then pros.com obviously is what we partner with them. They are one of the managers of the network of one of the networks that provide on-demand interpreting services through BoostLingo, and they use our platform. And we're actually working on some trainings with them to enhance our partnership and enhance um, the different sort of skill sets you can have using both platforms. Um, so stay tuned for that, everybody. It's going to be really important, really useful information for anybody who's a linguist. I understand that there's definitely people out there who are more translation focused, but using both of these tools, it just opens up a lot of doors for other opportunities for linguists.
Right.
So yeah, so LinkedIn, and then also just another sort of tip here is stay up to date with a lot of the language industry blogs and articles, experts out there. We repost on our Facebook. We post blogs every week about industry trends for interpreters specifically. So stay tuned and always pay attention to what's sort of new, what's trending in the interpreting industry.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So, and then also obviously conferences. Go to as many
Right.
conferences as you can.
Yes.
They're they can be expensive, but try to get to one or two a year if you can. Um, they open up a lot of doors. You meet so many people. I've heard countless times of interpreters in our network getting getting jobs through conferences. So
Right. Right.
highly recommend. Um,
Yes.
yeah, now getting down to sort of the nitty gritty more of what your day looks like as an interpreter. I know a lot of times people don't necessarily take into account how difficult it can be, like in terms of emotionally, especially when you're interpreting for cases that are social services or emergencies, medical, 911, those kinds of things. I always like to touch on how interpreters practice self-care after difficult interpreting sessions.
Yes.
Yeah, Alfie, if you could give me sort of an idea of what helps for you after a long day interpreting.
Right. Exactly. In this field, um, it's sometimes quite stressful, both emotionally and mentally. Of course, it can also be physically if you sit a lot, but mostly like with medical calls. As Caroline was saying, some cases are just tough, and sometimes after a lot of calls, sad situations, as humans require to de-stress, depressurize, and in my case, there are several different things that I like to do in order to achieve this. I personally like the to go to the steam rooms and get a massage. Kind of combine those two, and that really helps after like a long week or a long couple of weeks, depending. Uh, I do this when I really need to de-stress, right? And there are other things that I like to do if I have less time, depending on how much time I've got. Sometimes something as simple as cleaning and organizing things around the house while listening to my favorite tracks, that will help, and especially mentally. And there are other things I like to do, like cooking, although I rarely have the time for that anymore. I would like to eventually pick it up again. And as I said at the beginning, my son is my priority. So if both him and I have the time, if we're both home and we aren't busy, we'll probably uh, do something together, like practice some guitar, which we like to do, and play some chess, which he's getting better at, and it's becoming more and more difficult to beat him.
That
Sometimes,
sounds fun.
right? Sometimes I have to think and replan my strategy because he just uh, defeats me. And yeah, we also like to take our dog to the park. We have a pet, and we absolutely love it. So pets are always good. I'm a big fan of dogs. I love dogs, and sometimes even looking at my dog, petting my dog, and just giving her love is something that really helps. So I guess we all have our things that we like to do, and mostly just
Yeah,
give yourself some time to be yourself, be with the people and animals that you love, and or by
yeah,
yourself,
yeah.
relaxing. I'm a fan of the steam and massage combo. That's really good as well. Meditation sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
those are all great tips. I'm just curious myself. Is your son also bilingual? Is he learning English Spanish too?
yes, I've made sure of that. In fact, I've told him that it is thanks to this that I have the privilege of working in this beautiful, um, also important industry. It's
Yeah,
he understands the he's 9 years old. I mean, but there are ways to talk to children where they can understand transcendence, right, and the importance of things.
right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, 9 years old, they understand a lot more than people would think, especially
Yes.
when it comes to these like human. I mean, they'll go to the doctor too. They see what it's like. They feel all the emotions that any client or LEP would feel in a situation like that too. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, no, I think it's great that you're sort of trying to carry on the legacy there with your son.
Yes.
And then yes, obviously self-care. It's different for everybody, right? But just do
Right.
mainly just do anything that will make you feel like you're gonna be able to decompress after a long day, and
Mhm.
also just give yourself space to um, to feel a little not off, but to feel something, because a lot of times you
Mhm.
won't realize that there is vicarious trauma involved, meaning that if you're interpreting for a session that's sort of traumatic, then
Mhm.
you're vicariously going to feel something, and then
Right.
maybe sometimes be confused about that feeling. So just give yourself time and give yourself patience when it comes to those difficult sessions. And
Yes.
just a note here, I'm actually going to be doing a webinar specifically about self-care for remote interpreters in January. So
Great.
stay tuned. I'm going to be working with Marjorie Bancroft from Connecting Cultures, or sorry, Cross Cultural Communications. Um, she's a publisher and CEO of the organization. We're going to be talking through various skill sets and toolkits that are very useful for just cases just like this for remote interpreters. So stay tuned for the information on that.
I'll definitely be
So
there. Sounds great.
yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting, and it's kind of a topic that's close to my heart too, just because I come from social work, so I know exactly
Right.
how it feels to have that vicarious trauma in your life and not know what to do with it. So yeah. Um, so moving on, what would you kind of recommend to interpreters who are starting out, just basically as a stepping stone to create a successful interpreting career?
Well, as I said previously, and I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it. Just I think first thing is to fall in love with what you're doing. If you understand the beauty and importance of what we as interpreters do, I believe the rest will somehow fall into place. Uh, if you continue just doing your best, and perhaps more specifically, a stepping stone could that I think would be starting out. Definitely get to take a course or certification to either improve or acquire a new skill that, of course, may propel you to new heights.
Yeah, those are great tips. Also, kind of like if you're brand new to the industry, um, check out some YouTube videos. See what it's actually like to be a remote interpreter. You know, and follow webinars like the ones you're following with us at Buslingo. Ask questions. Talk to industry experts. Get out there and see if it's something that suits you before you um, invest a ton of money in a course or certification. Also, just get your feet wet is I guess what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, of course, if you're if you're really trying to launch your career, there are certain certifications and courses you're going to need to make sure you have before you can start interpreting,
Right.
especially in the medical field and legal fields too.
Yes.
So just to delve a little deeper and get some more sort of anecdotes, experiences of what it's been like for you as an interpreter, Alfie, could you mention one or two experiences that have shaped or changed your career in an impactful way as an interpreter?
Well, yes. Mm, as a lot of you, I'm sure, have had some special or special cases that you keep close to your heart, that you remember. In my case, perhaps the most meaningful has been a time when the time when I interpreted for two engineers that were very far away from each other. They were trying to configure some satellites and install and configure some satellites and computer systems in order to communicate a remote village in the depths of some jungle in South America, so that the
Wow.
people, yeah, so that the people living there could get much needed supplies, doctors, and medications from the outside world because they were completely uncommunicated. They were cut off from the outside world. So, in fact, my understanding is that the people living in this remote village were pretty much dying from diseases that could be very easily prevented, cured, or treated. So that I'd say is probably the most significant um, experience as an interpreter that I've had, and of course, you can imagine how I felt, how incredibly well I felt when after a long 4 hour call. I am not sure how long it was, something like that. Everything was working fine, so the mission had been accomplished, and
Yeah,
of course,
wow.
yeah, that was amazing.
I would have felt like a hero on top of the world. That's amazing. I
Yes,
mean, it's
exactly.
especially just like it's not just one client you were dealing with. You made an entire village, get access to something they would not have had access to. That's really incredible. So yeah, people listening here, those are the types of things you can do if you're an interpreter. Um, so the opportunities to help people are sort of endless there. Um,
Yes.
there was another experience you had told me about before, I think, that you
hmm
mentioned.
Yes, like Caroline is saying, and as you heard me, there are so many different ways that we can help and make an impact far beyond what we would expect sometimes. Another meaningful experience that I can definitely share with you is when I interpreted for an immigration lady officer and a 13-year-old kid who had been in the desert trying to get to U.S. and was now in custody of the Border Patrol. And well,
Okay.
you can imagine, yeah, he was in very bad shape and required food, water, and medical attention, of course. And I had very little time working as an interpreter at that moment, at that time, and right there and then, I knew that this was the industry I wanted to work on from now on.
Yeah, and that's, just think of the impact you had for that 13-year-old kid who was just trying to survive. It's huge. Just think about what the way you changed his experience by being able to help him communicate. That's exactly
Absolutely.
what this industry is all about. So it's just really cool to hear about those experiences firsthand. Um,
Yes.
and I'm sure you have a million more, but just in terms of time, we'll move on to the
Right.
next
Right.
question.
Yes.
Um, what are some basic tips you can offer to interpreters who are looking to get experience and become certified?
Well, if we're talking basic, of course, I'd say that proving your language proficiency through one of the many standardized tests out there is probably as basic as it gets. Also, if you plan to interpret for a specific industry, such as legal or medical, it's always best to learn as much as you can about it. And there are many great courses out there, especially those that provide some sort of certification, so that you can show and prove your proficiency and your skill set to others. Like,
Right. Yeah, those are
mhm,
those are great tips. And it's, industry specifics. I always like to mention when it comes to experience and certification. Um, Certification is so important, but it's also extremely important to stay on top of the industry trends. Even doctors have to make sure that they're constantly learning what's new in the industry. So as an interpreter, you also have to stay on top of what's new so that you're able to communicate it between the doctor and the client. Um, Same as with legal, there's always new bills, new laws being passed. It's always important to be able to sort of stay on top of that. And it helps you stay well-rounded as an interpreter too.
mhm.
Um, yeah, so those are all great, great tips. Um, and talking about staying well-rounded, this is another one that's sort of interesting here. Conferences. What are some conferences, if you had to choose, um, that you would recommend for interpreters?
Well, one that is, I'd say, great for beginners and or for anybody in general. In fact, the conference or the talk is actually called "We Are All Interpreters." It's by Ryohei Onishi, a Japanese interpreter, who talks
Mm-hmm.
about using the power of imagination to understand meaning when words don't make sense by themselves. He explains how meaning is beyond language, and why machines will never replace human translation or interpretation, because they just can't do this, and so that is something that only humans can do. So you can find it on YouTube. It's called "We Are All Interpreters," and it's you'll notice right away. It's Ryohei Onishi. Ryohei Onishi, that's
Mm-hmm.
his name, and it's very easy to find. And it's not very long. It's actually quite short and very easy to understand.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, I've heard of this and I haven't watched it, so I'm gonna watch it after we hang up here after the webinar. But that's a great point, and it's just a lot of times when I tell people the kind of industry I'm in, they always say, "What about AI? Isn't Google Translate going to take over the world?" Blah blah blah. But this is just an example of, come on, we are humans. We need to be
No,
able
not
to
happening.
empathize with each other, and machines can't empathize.
Exactly.
So the interpreter industry isn't going anywhere.
Right.
um, yeah, so great point there. And just in terms of like on-site conferences, I'm just going to mention a couple I've been to. I went to the TIA conference this past March, was in Sacramento, California. It's a healthcare conference. It was a really great way for me to meet other um, healthcare interpreters and get a lay of the land of how they make their careers, what sort of ways they enhance their success. And then also people in the medical interpreting industry in the United States specifically should be aware of CCHI, and they're a national certification entity. So I went to their summit actually in Minneapolis in October, which was really interesting just to hear about some of the industry trends because they're really trailblazing the certification processes for medical interpreters, healthcare interpreters specifically. So yeah, just a couple there if you're interested or trying to figure out what to go to, what to prioritize. Those are some that we've invested in. So just to kind of circle back, and we're going to be finishing up soon. So guys, if you have any questions for Alfie or myself, please do write them in the question panel, and we'll get to them at the end. But Alfie, last question for you. What is the climate of interpreting like where you live? You did mention a little bit that there's not as much sort of face-to-face. So I'm just curious, what is it like in Morelia where you live?
Right, right. Well, as you already know, I live in central Mexico in the very beautiful colonial city of Morelia, and in the also very beautiful state of Michoacan. And this is the state capital. Its historic center is listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, and it's the largest city in the state, but definitely not the largest city in the country. Because of this, it's more of a tourist attraction than it is a diplomatic destination or international business hub like Mexico City or others, where there's more of an international face-to-face dynamics going on. But so to answer this question, I'd say there's really more of a tourist guide and hotel services scene here than there is an interpreter climate or interpreter scene. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so yes, in fact, according to the Pros.com interpreter pool that I belong to, I'm the only interpreter working with them from this part of the country. So
Wow, interesting. Well, it sounds like a beautiful place. I hope I can come visit at some point.
you're welcome
I love
whenever you like.
I love Mexico. I love Mexico, and I miss speaking Spanish. So sometime I'll make a trip out there.
You're
I'm
all
just gonna
welcome to
check here
come.
if we have. Thank you. Let's see. I do have one question, and it's gonna vary depending on your language, of course. But any sort of medical resources like a glossary that you would recommend, or something that you have used to keep up with medical
Yes.
terminology?
Yes, in fact, over at the pros.com website, they have a lot of interesting tools One of those is a glossary, but this glossary is actually built by us, the members of the community. So because Prozcom um, hosts a lot of linguists and all sorts of language specialists from around the world, uh, it's a great resource for specialized dictionaries and like I said, these glossaries, they have a function that's called kudos, where they
Right.
right. It's a great system because since we are all language professionals there somehow, whether translators, um, interpreters, or whatnot, proofreaders, etc. A lot of the times we'll ask each other questions when we are in doubt or not sure of how to use a certain term, or how to translate a term or a sentence or an idea into other
Mhm.
language. We can ask the community, and we get answers from all the experts, because everyone is an expert in their field in pros.com. So um, the system works by peer-to-peer selection. So the best answer, or the answer that is voted as the best answer by most of us peers, gets kudos points, depending on the type of question, and and you can accumulate these kudos points, and the more you participate, the more likely you are, of course, to provide the best answer for that question, for that specific question. And if the answer you provided is something that is not even registered in any of the dictionaries or the glossary that's in the website, um, it'll be added to the website's glossary, and you'll be listed as a contributor to the
That's so
pros.com
cool.
glossary. Yes, it is. Yes, and
Yeah,
I've had the
and it's
privilege to provide some glossary terms there, so it does feel great when
that's
you
the,
accomplish.
that's exactly what this industry needs, is because sometimes there is no standard out there. There is no dictionary that tells you how to say this in this very
Yes.
very remote dialect, or in this small town or small region they say it like this, versus in uh, another area where they speak the same language they say it like this. So it's
Hmm.
always really, like you said, you guys are the experts in your culture, in your industry, in your language. So it's so cool that you're able to share that and capitalize off of it. So
Yes.
let me see if there's any other questions. I don't think there are for now. Yeah, so just to clarify, pros.com is PROZ.com. Uh, and you feel free to email me if you have any questions. Also, Caroline at blueslingo.com. And we'll be sending out a recording after this of the webinar, and I'll also be sure to include that YouTube link. We are all interpreters, just because I find it really poignant and interesting too. And yeah, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Alfie, so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Our next
Thank you
webinar is
very
going to be
much.
yeah, thank you so much for coming in. It's been really interesting
It's been
hearing
a
about your
pleasure.
experiences.
I'm honored.
Just
Thank you.
a quick, that's great. Just a quick note. We do have a webinar coming up January 15th, 11 a.m. PST. It's going to be a toolkit webinar for self-care for remote interpreters. So do stay tuned, and I hope that everybody has a lovely holiday, whatever and wherever you're celebrating. And I'll see you all in the new year. Thank you again, Alfie.
Sounds great. Yes, thank you, Caroline. Once again, it's been a pleasure and an honor to be here today with you in yet another episode of Ideas by Interpreters, and we're here.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Have a great holiday New Year.
Bye.